we talked about how money goes to Hanford from the government. And I guess there's incentives for people to either have nothing happen or to have certain things happen by a certain deadline. And so we talked about how the incentives are greater than the penalties. So as Tom was talking about, people will do things by breaking the law because the penalties aren't enough to outweigh getting your incentives done. Therefore, things happen that aren't supposed to. So our question was, how do you think that this imbalance can be corrected, / what can be done to help this imbalance go away so that the penalties are more equal to the incentives?
Who do you pick first that you would like to hear from?
Maybe like Mike or Tom or...
I think Tom's more suited for this answer, but that's a tough question. Those are called PBIs, performance-based incentives, and the contractors sign a contract with the government that if they get something done in a certain time frame, that they will get a performance-based reward for that. Our company last year, I think, received $23 million in bonus money for meeting certain milestones. That's a tough question because we've talked about that a lot, about you're rewarded for doing good and which we do a lot of good at Hanford. Believe me, there is a lot of good that's done. I don't want to talk bad about it because it's where I work and where I live. And the fact is that we do a million things great out there. I work with great scientists, great engineers, chemists, some of the most knowledgeable people in the world. But unfortunately, one aw shit trumps 1,000 attaboys. And when you do something bad, it's not good. So how you penalize somebody for that? Difficult question, very difficult. And these contractors are in the business to make money. So their PBIs become a priority. And unfortunately, finding the bad things and finding problems that they are not being rewarded for tend to get pushed to the wayside. But I'm gonna let Tom knows a lot more about this than I do, but that's kind of what I see at my level.
So the situation we saw happen at Hanford a couple of years ago was that a lot of stimulus money came into the Hanford site, and they called them Obama bucks out there. And it was about $2 billion extra than the $2 billion they usually get. And the problem with that money was that they had very strict deadlines where you had to get the work done by a certain time or you did not get paid. And the site, some of the contractors at the site kind of went crazy. And for instance, one contractor tore down 14 huge buildings still containing asbestos, and that was against the law. And Hanford thought it was just fine. Workers didn't like it. There was a stop work every day filed by workers, and lots of complaints and employee concerns. All of those were dismissed, and in fact, then the EPA Inspector General came in and stopped work and started reading people, literally, putting people under oath and reading them their Miranda rights because this was such a serious violation. But nonetheless, the company was still compensated, for meeting those deadlines. And the penalties were very small compared to what, so you apologize and shuffle your feet and promise never to do it again. But in the end, what's really going to count is that you got paid a lot of money. And there's so many examples out there like that. I'd be here until midnight talking about it. And the system is really broken that way. It's way too much about money than it is about, and Mike Geffre is right. There's a lot of good stuff that happens out there. However, there's also, a lot that gets by that doesn't, that there's not good accountability. And there just needs to be better accountability. That's taxpayer money. And there needs to be more people watching how this money's being used. There needs to be more daylight between the regulators and these companies that are out there to make money. They're unabashed about it, right? That's what they're in business for. And they know what the rules are. And if the rules allow them to fudge and to skirt and to, obfuscate and even to lie, everyone winks and they get by with it. The era seems to be coming to an end a little bit because there are prosecutions now happening at Hanford. It's made the paper a little bit, but it's certainly, more interest now in how is this money being spent. And there basically just needs to be more accountability and scrutiny by outside agencies about what's going on there.
Next question from the audience. Yeah, go ahead, please.
Okay, so there's been a lot of talk about mitigation as far as fixing the waste in Hanford right now. But we were wondering in our group whether there's been any developments on shutting down plants as far as mitigation goes. I don't know who to ask.
Are you talking about reactors?
Right, like the reactors, the plants themselves, not just the waste treatment centers.
Okay.
Right.
Well, all 9 reactors that produced plutonium are now shut down. The Columbia Generating Station is still operating, so that's something that's outside of the Department of Energy's control in the Hanford site. So that's something you could work on, but it's not Hanford related other than that it's on the Hanford site. So really all of the operating facilities that were involved with plutonium production are shut down.
But as I understand, the Columbia Generating Station has 4 times as much spent fuel rods in their water facility than they had in Fukushima. And so that could be a problem if they don't start dry storage, putting this stuff in dry storage.
Just to kind of explain that a little bit, there's Hanford's a large facility. It's 500 square miles, and you have out there one private contractor that is not part of the Hanford cleanup itself. It is actually the power reactor. And what is the latest name? Energy Northwest. I'm sorry, because when I first started there, it was called the Whoops, and they due to bad naming, they changed that. But that power reactor is a power generating facility that's not part of the actual Hanford cleanup, and they were not part of the weapons production. And so there's almost 2 identities out there, and I know that a lot of groups put the 2 together, which they're very totally separate, but they each have their own issues. And with the fuel rods, that is a concern that there is out there. But that is very much different than the Hanford cleanup operation itself. So,
I just want to say something real quick, then we'll get back to the tank waste. This just goes to show the more that you talk about Hanford, the more complicated it gets. But yes, there is active nuclear power reactor out there, and if you do want more information, just see me afterwards, because WPSR is working on shutting it down. But we should get back to the tank waste.
Okay, next question.
Hi. Our group, our question is directed more towards Mike. First of all, thank you for being so open and coming out to the public about all these issues. It's really great having people like you who are willing to speak out against these kinds of issues. We were kind of wondering what your experience has been like after you've spoken out, and your relationship with your employers and things like that.
Well, it's actually been really good. Surprisingly, I'm what you call, I guess they call me a whistleblower, but I don't really look at it that way, because when I decided to contact somebody to talk about what I experienced, and I felt that what I was doing was kind of set the record straight, I stumbled across a report that was written by our company in January that I don't think was meant for me to see. It was 500 pages of an assessment report of this tank. And when I read it, I became very frustrated because it had discredited the work I had done. And it also did not tell the truth. And this paper was put out for public use. It was released to the public. And I felt to myself, well, how am I, I felt the need to clear it up. I felt like, what am I going to do to get the record straight? And let the public know really what has happened out there. And I struggled with that for quite a while. And then, fortunately, I have an old classmate that works for a TV station that I just happened to send a letter to and got in contact with. And at first, I just felt like I was going to have an easy way to just set the record straight. I took this 500-page report and I corrected it like an old history teacher. And I redlined it and I wrote everything that was accurate, true in it. And I gave that to Susanna Frame, and thinking that Susanna would take this and read this on the air and make everything straight. Well, unfortunately, for credibility reasons, you need someone that can go on camera and point out the problems, and it just so happened I was the one that found the problems, and I was the one that recognized the leak at first. Well, then the process went along with the interviews, and I really didn't feel nervous about the situation because I felt very confident that I was doing the right thing and that the information I had was very correct. It was all documented paperwork that was access to the public, and I just pointed out the facts. And I kind of deciphered this 500-page document to make it more readable and more understandable. So nothing I was really doing was giving my opinion. I really didn't have an opinion about who was doing the right, who was doing the wrong. I was just pointing out the facts that was right. I didn't really get nervous till I met Tom. And Tom and I met, and Tom, he prepared me. He said a few things that scared me. So when the story first came out, I went to work. The first time I got a little nervous. And in the past, there's been disgruntled employees that have caused disruption at work, and they came to work, and the Hanford Patrol was there, met them in their office, took their security badge from them, and gave them a ride home. So that first day after the story, I kept looking around all the corners to see if the Hanford Patrol was staking me out. A little nerve-wracking, but what happened, it was an amazing thing because I got to work and I was kind of, in a weird way, a celebrity amongst my coworkers. I got high fives, I got hugs. People said, thank you for doing what you're doing. And I got a bag of cookies. Someone's wife sent a bag of cookies to work. She said to her husband, why didn't you do this? Why didn't you do what he did? Why does he have to do this all by himself? I mean, the poor guy is out there throwing himself to the wolves. And anyhow, he was in the doghouse and I got a bag of cookies. And that has been the attitude since I first came out. And I think the reason was because I was not an unhappy person at Hanford. I was always an upbeat person. I enjoyed my job. And so I wasn't disgruntled. I wasn't, the guy that was always causing the problems. I was the guy fixing the problem. So I think I surprised my management and some people in the upper company that I was the one that was talking. And it surprised them enough that they realized that, I didn't have a bad track record. So they couldn't dig up much dirt on me. So I felt pretty comfortable. And I have a great support system. Susanna Frame, King 5, wonderful people. They've treated me like a king. Tom and Hanford Challenge have been so helpful, encouraging. I've been standing by me. I don't look myself as a whistleblower. I kind of look at myself as a guy that's in a band, and I just play the whistle. So, so anyhow, but I hope that answers your question.
I have a question for Russell Jim. I wonder if part of our problem in relation to Hanford is that we have failed to acknowledge that really what we did there was not right. That what we did there was create the plutonium to fuel a bomb that we dropped on civilians in Japan. And that was actually evil. And until we acknowledge that, it's very hard to clean up this mess. And I think you might be in the best position to address that.
It certainly is a Faustian bargain that science has made with the general public. And I'm sure many of you know the story of Faust, the legend, how he made a deal with the devil that he could be the strongest wizard in the world. The devil told him, fine, but you just owe me your soul. Didn't work out. We feel the same way quite often. I appreciate your question. Along with that, and percentage-wise, the Native American Indian has fought for this country in all the wars and police actions at a percentage higher than any other race. But my father in World War I, my uncles in World War II, my brothers during the Korean War, my nephews in the Vietnam, Korea, they all came home. And like me, I'm fighting to maintain the land in which I grew up in. It's ironic that you go out there and you put your life on the line like my father and others did, and come home and have to fight the United States again on our own homeland, just to maintain our culture. The very being that I have inside of me, this related to the natural foods and medicines, the resources that we hope can be determined clean one day, all in the question of how clean is clean. But it becomes so difficult based upon the potential liability on the United States of America, how to prove whether or not those foods are safe. And it covers all the food that is necessary for my gene pool, my DNA, and that's the salmon, that's the eels, that's all the marine life out of the river systems. And then the natural foods out of the ground, which the foods and medicines number more than 70. So I can only depend upon this time, like gentlemen and ladies you see here have dedicated their lives, their professions to these problems, and to hope that more questions will ensue, like the lady asked the question. My answer to the one question is that the corporate structures seem to consider this Hanford site a golden goose that lays a golden egg every year, $2 billion. Only about 42% of that goes for the administration to keep the tanks cool and maintain things. Most of the other goes to contractors. Are they clean enough? I have a difference of opinion on many. You have the environmental restoration disposal facility. It's a canyon. There's 10 of them down there now. And there's the first one is 78 feet deep, 500 feet wide, 1,500 feet long. And they took stuff along 100 site along the Columbia River and hauled it up there 8 miles and dumped it in there. And they call it disposal. To me, it's not. They're just moving this material from one place to another. And so it's kind of aggravating. All based upon your question that you asked. And I appreciate it. I don't want to take up too much time, but it is a very poignant question, and I appreciate it. Thank you.
I have a question for Mr. Lyon from the Department of Ecology. I'm Susanna Frame from King TV. And my question is, what has the Department of Ecology done, if anything, based on the revelations that have come forward through Mike Geffre and our additional reporting that we've documented thoroughly? That in general, the contractor out there, the federal government's contractor, ignored scientific evidence of a leak for a year. And then my second question is, we found out tonight from Erika's presentation that it sounds like the state was kept in the dark until October of last year, when we know that there was solid evidence a couple months before that there was, plutonium, cesium, all sorts of the nastiest stuff out there coming from a sample. So it's a two-part question.
So the first part was, what are we doing about what we just heard from you and Mike? Is that right?
Well, yeah. I mean, I don't know if you're familiar with our work, but we've done
Yeah.
6 stories so far. And
Yeah, I've watched your videos.
Okay.
So I know what you were
Yeah.
saying, and I know what Mike said too.
Okay.
And I appreciate, quite honestly, I appreciate what you did. Just shut me off, so, oh, there we go. I appreciate what you did, and I wasn't aware of these things, to be honest. And we're internally processing what we should do, to be honest. And we have a limited number of staff that work on this project, and we're focused right now on addressing the AY102 leak and making sure that the pumping is initiated correctly and that we can get that waste safely moved out of the tank so that the leak that is very small will only stay a very small leak and not be exacerbated and become a real problem. Because I think we might be able to appreciate that Mike was talking about alarms that were detecting very small quantities of waste that were in the annulus. It didn't fill up the annulus. It didn't alarm some of the major leak detection alarms. It didn't do all 3 annulus alarms that we typically have. So the leak has been small, and that's what right now. So the state is focusing on get us a plan for pumping it. We're going to review the plan as soon as we can. We're going to respond to the plan and take care of that. Then we're going to move on. And I can tell you that we're going to move on to the information that you showed and that Mike brought up. But we weren't aware of it until your show, until Mike, and you spoke out in the public. So I can say that, as a person, that's kind of weird that we would find out about it on TV, but we find out a lot of things on TV that we should know about before. And we're going to, as soon as we do, we look into what we should do about that. So that's at least the response to the first question. What was the second part, or did I get?
How did you feel about being kept in the dark?
Well,
Because,
yeah, I personally, I'm sort of outraged, I would say. That's my opinion. But I'm also representing the state of Ecology, our state of Washington Department of Ecology, and what we will do is we'll look into the information and see what we see as facts and make a determination of what our response is. And I can't predict that, and I can't predict what that looks like. I have bosses that make decisions.
I'm just asking because, is that an indicator of what else don't you know? And I'm assuming the state of Washington wants to know the big stuff.
I'm a normal person just like you, and I wonder the same thing. I don't know. And so what we do as an agency, we have inspectors in our office, and we have permits for most things, but the tank systems aren't permitted at the time. We're getting that permit written and commented on. So our inspectors go out and look at the information that we think we should target, and then we've written up violations and notices of compliance, and we've actually taken enforcement on a number of actions, and we've done them successfully. So once we start to look at something, if there's something wrong, we usually can take care of it or address it and try and change behavior. And that's kind of the bottom line for me is the observation casually from your stories is that there's a behavior issue, and I don't know what we're going to do about it yet. That's just my opinion, so don't say the state of Washington says that. We didn't say that. I said that. So. Okay? Does that answer your question?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, I think we have time for one more question. I was going to see if anybody wants to ask a question to our fabulous students. The reason I'm saying that is we have a lot of young, brilliant energy in this room. There are a lot of young people who are ready, they've been studying this issue, working hard all quarter. They're ready to take on the challenges of inheriting this, and we have to make space for them in this dialogue, right? And so I absolutely, generation has a lot of talents that we need, and they have nothing but creativity and brilliance to offer. So I'm wondering if they could answer a question. Do you have a question, please?
For the students, since you have to worry about this problem for a longer time frame in the future, how would you construct your risk management framework to address the issues as they start with your time in school until after you get your lifespan? How would you address the risks?
Well, first of all, I would like to look at what other students who've taken this class have done. And Daniel, I believe you've taken this class years back. And yep, so he is one perfect example of students like us, what we can do, because after learning about the issue, he became really involved. And I think I can envision several of our students wanting to be more involved in student organizations like Hanford Challenge, or just getting the public more aware. And as far as coming up with something to do throughout our lifetime, I think, like Mike said, this thing is something we'll be inheriting, and so will our children, and we definitely will have to keep that in mind, and keep monitoring how our state is dealing with this issue, and keep raising our voices, go to the state elected representatives, and keep pushing them to do the best that they can.
I think the biggest thing that I've thought of is communication and awareness. Like before I took Holly's class last quarter, I had no idea what Hanford was, which is unsurprising because I'm not even American, in case you can't tell. But even from Australia, something this big, being the most contaminated site, you'd think that we would hear something from it, even in another country. So I think sort of awareness and communication, and just sort of getting other people knowing about it, and even if we talk to 1,000 people and then 10 of those people really want to make a huge difference, and that's 10 more people that can help. So the more people we talk to, the more people that we can get on board, and getting into the future and working it out. So I think it's really important that we just increase awareness.
So we are out of time. I'm going to ask our fabulous MCs, Trey Watson and Thomas Tutogi, to come up and close us out. And on their way up, I want to thank all the people in this room who contributed so much to the education of the students over this quarter. And I hope you know that the time spent investing in these students will pay off for years, because this generation has now inherited the responsibility and the legacy that they can help pass along to others. And all of you were vital in that. And particularly want to give a shout out to Liz Mattson and Danny Noonan. And we want to thank Hanford Challenge and Physicians for Social Responsibility for partnering so closely with our class all quarter and making that learning environment work so well. So thank you very much. I'll pass it to the MC.
Thank you, Holly. Once again, we want to thank all of our speakers for taking the time out of their busy schedules to come out and inform us and constantly help the progression of this change. On each one of your tables, there's this little informational pamphlet, thank you, that allows you multiple ways to where you can vote and get involved, blog, different websites, and also the big get involved signs. A good way to really understand more of what's taking place and how you can take initiative yourselves. And it's very important that we all reach out and connect with someone else, because like any other social network we're involved in, once one person tells another person, it's a chain reaction.
Before we leave, once again, I just personally want to thank everybody as a class. We just want to thank everybody for coming out and sharing your time with us. But most importantly, we want to thank our fabulous Professor Holly for being the great person that she is. And bringing us all together to form this meeting, to raise awareness about Hanford, because it really is something special, and it really should be more well known throughout the future and more generations to come. So thank you, Holly, for everything you do for us. Thank you for putting this together, helping us put it together, and we hope you guys have a good night. Thank you guys for all coming out and sharing your time with us.